Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Back in 2011, me and my immediate family traveled to Saudi Arabia for Umrah, or what's known as a lesser pilgrimage. You visit Mecca, make rounds around the Kaaba, pray with all your heart and soul, and you get the picture. My dad and I were excited because we were all about going on a spiritual journey and casting away the problems of the world. But as it turns out, some problems just wouldn't leave us. As soon as we landed in Jeddah's airport, our plan was to take a taxi to Mecca and get the Umrah done while we were still gung-ho about God. However, we were instead diverted to our relative's house in Jeddah, where we discovered that 4 or 5 of my mother's relatives and their families had gathered up and spontaneously crashed into my grandfather's house for one giant family reunion. Naturally, my dad and I, as well as my maternal grandfather, were really upset over this development, as my mom's side of the family is full of, for the lack of a more polite word, the shady folks. Most of them I was on good terms with, but once I realized that my least favorite uncle and aunts had come with the crew, my enthusiasm just deflated like a balloon. For a quick comparison, Uncle Zubair and Aunt Rapina were the Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia of the family to me. They would spoil their own kids rotten, be as stingy as they could with me before getting noticed. And oh, did they love to take advantage of the fact that I couldn't speak Urdu at all when I was younger. They talked smack about me and make fun of me for all sorts of things. And when my mother brought it up, they simply waved it off as me misunderstanding whatever they said in Urdu. My mother trusted them. Sure, I couldn't speak the language well when I was 8, but I could damn well understand a lot of what they were saying, and just going through all of that really made me intensely dislike them. Back to 2011, the entire rodeo of relatives came up with a great plan. Let's complete our Umrah trip as a group of 23 people. It'll be a great time. Me and my father reluctantly agreed to this, and before we head to Mecca, my father makes a little contingency plan for the rare occasion me and my siblings get lost. My mother shares it with the group, and everyone thinks it's a good idea. If someone gets lost, we all return to IEX floor of the clock tower building and wait for the rest to come. No problems, right? We go to Mecca. We have dinner in the Clock Tower Hotel, and as I'm getting napkins to clean up after the food, the men splits up and abruptly leave for the Kaaba. The ladies already had left, and Aunt Rupina was still at the table, waiting on the napkins. When I ask her where all the men went, she smiles and points in the wrong direction, and also tells me twice that our contingency plan got changed, and we were to meet at Y floor if we got lost, instead of the original contingency plan. Had I been older, I would have noticed something was very wrong with her words, but I was 15 years old and fearful of being left behind, and so I ran off without even doubting her. The results of her misleading me amounted to 1 hour of checking out the entire hotel looking for my father and the men, and then heading out to the Kaaba and spending 3 hours circling the Kaaba, distracted and heavily disturbed by the fact that I couldn't find them anywhere, and then heading back to the new contingency plan's location and crying myself to sleep on a rusty chair because none of the guards understood me. I honestly thought I was lost for good. A couple hours later, my father finds me and he gets violently mad at me for ditching the group and going to the wrong floor. But he realizes something's up as soon as I tell him what Aunt Rupina told me. The men quickly arrive and hug me out, and when Uncle Zubair hugs me, he grins and asks me, "Did you feel the despair?" before laughing it off as I take the next minute to process this man's words. The entire group of 23 is just trying to talk to me and see the positives out of the situation on the car ride back, but the whole time I just have one thought on my mind. Did my uncle and aunt really just try to intentionally mislead me and lose me in a large city overseas? I later tell my parents the whole story. My father's a little bit unsettled, and the rest of the trip continues with my parents keeping a close eye on me. Their revenge. Back in 2015, we visited the homeland and met up with all these bozos who were excited to see my mom's American family. Just as expected, Uncle Zubair and Aunt Rubina are in the mix. I decided not to say anything about what happened 4 years prior, and I made my mom promise not to say anything about the incident. She loves to reminisce about things. About an hour into the trip, I realized that my uncle and aunt still think I have the same language comprehension I had when I was 8 years old. Amazing how they think I'm so stupid. But in 2015, I was finally able to speak and understand Urdu fluently. But I wasn't just going to tell them that. With that, I decided that I'd snoop around and maybe sit through their crap again with a recorder and show my mom that I was right all along. About them lying to my mom that they weren't crap talking to me. But this is where things get interesting. Uncle Zubair takes me along with his son as we visit a couple different apartments and houses he has the keys for, and help him clean up the houses. My neighbors are out on vacation and they asked me if I could help clean up for them. He tells me in his broken English, but I really doubt him between how fervently he's carrying the entire place and how he is indiscriminately throwing their belongings in giant trash bags and large rubber containers, belongings of neighbors that apparently trusted him enough to leave their spare keys with him as they stayed with relatives in America or elsewhere for the summer. It was weird and shady as hell. I'd never seen anything like this back in the States, but I connected the dots when, on another day, Uncle Zubair's son called me from one of the said apartments and asked me if I could walk over there and pick him up. Turns out the house was almost entirely empty of anything the neighbors owned, and my cousin already set a bunch of his own stuff in there and had the gal to tell me, "Papa said this is my apartment now." What a right. My uncle was robbing people of their apartments and houses when they were on vacation. A week later of some unnoticed eavesdropping, and I learned that Aunt Rupina and my other cousin are doing the same dirty work in the state/province right next to ours. They have better English and told me that they were going to the other state to help my cousin study, and I was just nodding it off. Yeah, go study, you liars. As if I didn't hear you at all 24 hours ago talking about cleaning house preparations. We're having dinner later that night with Uncle Zubair and a few other family members. And when there is a lull in the conversation, he just asks me, "Son, what's your favorite parts of the summer so far?" And I just smiled and replied in Urdu, "I love the real estate work you've been doing. Could you help me get a property as well?" His face just drains the moment he realizes I knew the crap he's been bullying. Everyone at the table starts asking questions because my uncle is the last guy to talk about house-related matters. They prompt me for more information and I just spill what his son said. "Papa said this is my apartment now." And what type of bullcrap he and his wife were doing 5 towns over. And the next thing I know, I am taking my dinner plate back to my room as the drilling commences in the dining room. As my family and the rest of the extended relatives finds out he's been clearing out apartments of neighbors who went overseas for the entire summer, maybe 10 or so such flats and little houses, and hauling their possessions to a storage unit somewhere, only God knows, the controversy gets really big. A couple homeowners get alerted and chase Aunt Rupina and my cousin out to other town, and it's not long after before my parents told me that our entire family pretty much disowned my uncle and aunt's family for pulling this immoral bullcrap when being trusted with people's keys. In the end, I never was able to stick him with that "did you feel despair" line he hit me with back in 2011, but man, am I glad I won't have to deal with their crap again. Edit, my mother did apologize after the entire thing came to light. We're all good over that issue. This might be long but worth the read, I think. Spec home build with a $12 million budget and a 16-month schedule. Next door neighbor immediately qualifies as a complete jerk. Knows everybody including the principals of the company I work for. At the very beginning of the work, he asks for a row of redwood trees to be planted as screening between the properties. Principals grant his request as a good neighbor gesture. $31,000. Every step of the project, he either stands out at the end of the drive taking pictures or he's flying his drone over the lot. He starts asking questions about whether or not work in progress is covered under the permit. He confides that he has obtained a copy of the permit and a set of plans. One day he asks us for a meeting to discuss the redwood trees. Yes, those trees. He comes over at the appointed time and introduces his wife's landscape architect. Famous guy apparently, and he tries pulling some muscle moves by trying to convince us that the redwood trees are stealing their water. They also don't fit his vision for the project they are considering, which will be a total side and backyard makeover with walkways, stone walls, fountains, and so on. He wants mature oak trees instead. cut down and remove the redwoods at our expense and plant new oak trees, also at our expense because, screening. We decline, which sends the famous architect guy and his wife into a rage. They decide to move forward with their project anyway, and the major earth moving, concrete forming, irrigation, and so on are all getting placed. Mr. Drone Guy continues to make efforts to get the oak trees swapped in, under threats that maybe some of the work we're doing isn't covered under the permit. Seems he also acted as a GC for his own remodel, so he must really know what he's talking about. He sends emails, registered letters from his lawyer, all in an effort to get us to swap out the trees. Finally, we are within sight of completing our project, and from the second floor we can see that they have really transformed their whole yard into little parklets with mature planting and walkways and all the other stuff. It's impressive. So I call the town for a courtesy inspection prior to final, and the next day the inspector, an old friend whose father is also an old friend, stops by to tour the property for any red flags. I save the best for last and we make it upstairs and make it to the best possible viewing point of the neighbor's magnificent landscape project, and my inspector friend casually but loudly says, "What the hell is all that? I never saw a permit come through for all that." And he bounds downstairs and heads back to the office, I'm guessing to pull files. Here comes the best part. Through abutting property searches that we always perform as due diligence, we discovered that the neighbor's side yard in its entirety is an 80-foot wide utility easement for the single largest underground water aqueducts for the entire region. Can't be built on. We kept mum. Now, because there is also a seasonal creek that crosses said easement, fish and game are notified of the work in progress. In addition, we now have the State Water Resources Board, along with the major water utility company inspections and enforcement department making inquiries, along with the town building department. No permit application was ever submitted for any of the work Mr. Drone Guy had done. Oof. Our property was sold, and during some modifications for the new owner, we watched with subdued glee as every stick and stone was removed from the offending area and was to be left in a natural state for eternity. Major fines were also levied. Backstory: when I was younger, I had a job at a small market in our city central. Usually, you can work from age 15 to 17, but as soon as you turn 18, you will most likely get fired. Once you turn 18, your salary increases a lot. This is important for later. For the past 2 years, I worked at the same shop sitting at a desk, but since I was nearing age 18, I knew I couldn't stay. This meant I knew I was about to get fired, and sure enough, a week before I turned 18, I was told I was fired. I told my boss I knew why, and it was understandable since the small shop needed to save as much money as possible, since the income and profit was already low for being a local city market and not some big shopping center. I got a bonus for being fired and decided to keep this bonus to use on something special. One day, weeks later, I saw that the same shop just got home some extremely expensive and unique food products, imported from around the world, and out of pure curiosity, I went there to buy some myself. I arrived at a really busy shop with many customers wanting to buy all these special beers, sausages, and so on. But I had set my eyes on this one thing: American candy. I live in the EU and American candy isn't really being sold so much in my country. So I was drooling from the thought of getting to try some of these big products I heard about on the internet. I went to take some of the candy and put it in my basket, and here steps in the male Karen. He was one of the greedy customers we had. When I was still working there, whenever there was a discount or something special, he just took as much as he could, not letting other customers buy some. It got so bad that we needed to put each customer may only purchase X amount of this product signs on some of our specialty products. He then goes up to me and says, "Are you packing these away already?" Haha, no. I was picking these for myself. But you're still working. You can purchase some when you're free from work. Sorry, but I don't work here anymore, mister. Yes, you do. I saw you some weeks ago in the counter. Well, I recently got fired since I turned 18. Yeah, that's good with you. Don't lie or I will call your boss and get you in serious trouble for stealing the products that are meant for the customers. Well, you can call him. It's not a joke. I really got fired since I'm turning 18. The male Karen then began screaming about how I was being disrespectful and how I shouldn't be working in the store anymore, how I was stealing and packing away special products from the customers so they couldn't buy any. I was getting pretty pissed at him since me and the boss already knew that he was a sour-bitter old man. But he always kept telling me that he was a good loyal paying customer. I always wanted to say screw it and say something whenever he went hoarder mode and bought all the specialty products. I told him to call my former boss and ask him if I still worked here. Out of nowhere, the greedy male Karen starts to take things out of my basket where I had my products, saying, "These don't belong to you." Where I then screamed at him for being so entitled and disrespectful, saying that he was the whole issue since I already admitted that I didn't work there. I then stopped screaming in the old man's face, to where I then saw two police officers walk down the hall towards me and the male Karen. I got so pale because it looked really bad. Since I was just done screaming my face off at the male Karen's face, the police officer then holds up his one hand to grab my attention, where I just stare him directly into the eyes, to where the male Karen then decides to slap me in the face and punch me in the stomach, making me drop the basket I was holding in my hands. It didn't really hurt, it just took me by surprise. The two police officers then went from walking and holding eye contact with me to running at us looking at the male Karen. They handcuffed him and called the boss, confirming with the camera, which has sound, that the male Karen was being a douche and that I told the male Karen that I didn't work at the store anymore. The officers told me they had a call from one of the bypassing customers, which got worried because they heard stealing being yelled in the store and the male Karen causing a tantrum. I left with my American candy that day and an apology from my boss, saying they should have done something about him before this happened. Apparently, this wasn't the first time the male Karen left the store in cuffs. Let me set the scene for you. I work in as a door greeter watching out for lost customers and folks with returns. Working in the lawn and garden section, I see this autistic young man. I guess he's autistic as he seems predominantly focused on his action and kinda has the actions of an autistic individual. This young man is sorting and moving potted flowers around, putting them in a very specific order, matching colors, size of pots, and height of the flowers themselves. Doing an amazing job at it too, I may add. He's bothering no one and most folks are just noticing him doing a bang-up job. But this one old crone of a woman sees him working and she stands behind this young man, arms folded and tapping her foot. At first I was thinking maybe it was her son or someone she was shopping with, but the next thing she did proved to me that I was mistaken. She clears her throat in that dreaded fashion we all know. Excuse me, you need to help me. The young man pays her no mind, continuing with his task. She doesn't like this, she clears up her voice and replies louder. You're not listening to me. You're going to help me, now. Before I can walk to her and ask her what she needs, she reaches out and grabs this young man by the right arm just above his elbow. I guess the sudden action of this and the young man's condition caused him to spin around and jerk his arm away from this lady. And the sudden movement startled the old woman, causing her to step backwards and lose her balance, causing her to sit down on her butt. It was like in slow motion watching her go from standing to sitting on the ground. By the time I reached the young man to see if he was okay, his mother had shown up but was asking what had happened. Before I could say anything, the woman who had caused this was up and berating this young man, saying he attacked her and she will have him fired and arrested. Meanwhile, this young man was almost crying and his mother was shocked. I told the mom to take her son and calm him down, that he has done nothing wrong and just make sure he's okay. The crazy old woman didn't like that I took his side. She began to lie and tell me she was a victim and she didn't do anything, that the employee, the young man, attacked her. I told her not so kindly that she was a liar and I had witnessed the whole incident and that the young man you forcefully grabbed doesn't work here and that you assaulted him. By now a crowd has gathered and the crazy woman has noticed that no one is giving her looks, but they believe her side of the story. She ends up getting banned from the store. When I turned to check on a young man and his mother, she was smiling at me and was thanking me for my help. She shops here regularly and the young man likes to arrange the flowers. It's calming to him.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.